Common sense has been out the window for way too long. They don't grandfather things in. They make change. Look at all the things we're going through. So that's why I said, you know what? I'm gonna do my own thing. I'll figure out what's out there. We'll maximize whatever he's entitled, eligible for. But we're gonna have to band together and meet folks with common issues and common needs and figure out what's best for us and our families.
Welcome back to Finding Common Ground with Heather and Steve. Today we're going to talk about the stuff you're not supposed to talk about. And our guest today is Jackie. She comes to us from New York City. She's a mom, a fellow advocate, and a powerhouse. And I can't wait to get started. So Jackie, tell us a little bit about you to kick this off.
Well, thanks you guys so much for having me. So like you guys, I have a boy with severe autism. He's been the reason for my work for the last 25 years. He's 29 now. I also have a typically developing 25-year-old. So mom is, I guess, my first job of all of them. When Joe was about 8, I started a program called SNAC. Speaking of the things you're not supposed to talk about, it used to be called the Special Needs Activity Center for Kids. We're not allowed to say that anymore. So now we are known as SNAC. So we serve, kids from 3 to 25 to 35 to, as Joe gets older, so are the kids we serve. People of all abilities. We have classes that, my other son Andrew was taking that Joe wasn't allowed in. So we just started our own thing so that they could both be in a place together and like siblings do. So I wouldn't have to go to 3 places for swim classes and music classes and have it be so complicated. So that's a big part of what I do. And I've been doing that for 25 years. And in the last 2 years since we've met, I co-founded the Families for Disability Rights is our 501c3 name. And we operate an initiative right now called the Coalition for Self-Direction. So it's an advocacy group, and that's how we met, and that's how I spend my days.
Right. There's a lot to advocate for, right? I mean,
Indeed.
we all totally
Indeed.
Understand that. And I'm going to tell you, when I first met you, we got off the call, and I remember calling Steve and saying, oh my gosh, I'm just so in awe of all these people in that group that just started their own thing. And then to me in that moment, I was like, I don't know how they do it. Well, now having a daughter who's 18 and realizing the limited options for somebody with severe autism that has really some medical complexities, I totally get why you did what you did and why you still fight for the things you're fighting for, because to me it sounded like such an undertaking. Oh, you're going to develop a whole program, or people who are opening their own homes. I just thought, I don't know if I'm equipped for that. No. And then you realize you don't have a choice. No one is coming to save us. And that's something that Steve and I have talked about a lot. I remember I put the picture of the knight in shining armor, and I just put it up on Facebook, and I said, the best things don't start in a boardroom. They start around the kitchen table. That's when the parents and the families
absolutely.
Come together and they decide.
we all say that, right? The best things we ever learned was from another parent. Certainly not from an agency or, it's just, and my other son, Andrew, always says, Mom, there is no cavalry. We're the cavalry.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you can't wait. And I think that that's the advocacy piece that parents right now are sitting and waiting and hoping that somebody does something. And when they realize that somebody could be them, that's the moment everything can change, because we can stand together and fight for the things that we all need, even if our kids are really different.
Without question. I mean, Joe's issues were apparent at 18 months. He started having seizures. So, this has been a long time situation for me. But I remember, when I first realized this wasn't going away, and I started to get involved and what are the government programs? What goes on? What is this world? I went to my first OPWDD meeting with a commissioner, and at the time it was still OMRDD. And an elderly man, I mean, that's no other way to say it. He was like, he must have been 85. He said, I'm 85. And he spoke with the commissioner at the time, I think it was Courtney Burke. And he said, I have a 60-year-old son whose group home is about to close. And he starts to cry. And he said, you're not supposed to do this. What if I was dead? Where's, and I realized then, this is like unbelievable. There's nobody really you can count on. We're going to have to just count on each other for this, because there's really no plan here. It's like these people are the same people that run the Department of Motor Vehicles. This isn't going to work. You're not going to be able to take care of Joe. So that was just so astounding to me, that there was really nothing that you could count on. And if they would change something like that at that age and move a 60-year-old man who'd been in his facility all that time, and it wasn't, it was after Willowbrook, of course, so this was a group home. What the hell? So just, just common sense has been out the window for way too long. They don't grandfather things in. They make change. Look at all the things we're going through. So that's why I said, you know what? I'm going to do my own thing. I'll figure out what's out there. We'll maximize whatever he's entitled, eligible for. But we're gonna have to band together and meet folks with common issues and common needs and figure out what's best for us and our families.
Jackie,
Absolutely.
hi. I'm glad to see you again. I remember when I first met you. Heather knows that I'm always looking for people who are doers. I'm not the one that I might be quiet in a lot of these meetings and stuff like that, but I'm reading the room. I'm calculating, and I'm going to do things behind the scenes to go make things happen. And so what I was attracted to what you did is because you're a parent who realized that, you know what, like you said, Calvary's not coming. All these provider agencies that are out there, too many of our kids are falling through the cracks. Even with them there, it tells me that we have to do something together as parents. And as Heather mentioned, I think we want to talk today about the things that you can't talk about. So Heather, I don't know if you want to start with some of those taboo topics.
There's so many. Just so you guys know, we have a Facebook page, and we had put up on the Facebook page, what are those taboo topics? The things that, the funny moments where that figure of speech maybe really got in the way, or the embarrassing toileting moments, or a public restroom, or the picky eaters. And people came up with some really great ideas. So I'm going to start off. I'm going to tell you a little bit of a story. I was in the grocery store with my daughter, Devin, and it was actually, she was doing really well at that point. We've had really hard moments where medical things and sensory things have been really hard, but this was a good day. And we were in the store, and she was watching the wheels on the shopping cart going around and around. And I was trying to teach her to hold onto the handle and push the shopping cart instead of riding in it, because she was bigger and people would stare at us if she was in the shopping cart. She was too big for that. And she dropped to her knees and started licking the shopping cart wheels. And I mean, there were a lot of people. We have a big fluffy service dog with us at the time, so everyone's, oh, the dog is so cute. And then they look at Devin on her hands and knees licking the shopping cart wheels. And this lady's like, that's disgusting. And I was instantly shamed and almost silent, and I almost apologized, because I felt like I had to. In those moments, society puts us in our place, and they want us to say we're sorry. But I have this big thing: don't feel bad for me, don't pity me, and don't make me say I'm sorry for something that's not something I can control. So I said, oh, Devin, we don't want to do that. And I tried to just redirect her and keep moving. And the lady tapped me on the shoulder and said, maybe you shouldn't bring her out when she's having a bad day. Mm-hmm. It's really hard on everybody else. I'm pausing because I almost want to cry talking about that moment. And I looked at her and I said, actually, we're having a really good day, and that's the only reason we're here. This is us on a good day. And I just walked away because I thought, that's not fair. That's not fair. Another time I'm walking through the store, and this lady has this young man, and he is having a meltdown, and his shoes are flying, his shirt's coming off, and I'm just walking behind her picking up the clothes. I'm not judging her.
Well, that's helpful. Right.
Right. I know what it feels like to be that mom. And when she got to the parking lot with her half-naked son who's beating her up, I helped her strap him in. I handed her the clothes, and she sobbed and said, "Thank you." And that's really what we all want. Not someone to shame us or correct us or tell us our kid needs a good spanking or we're not doing a good job parenting. We need somebody who can see we're struggling, who's willing to, if nothing else, quietly walk alongside us. Have you guys ever had a moment like that you've encountered?
Oh, sure. I mean, we all have, right? I mean, Joey's 30, so you can imagine. And when Joey was born, I mean, autism was very new to the lexicon. So there was no forgiveness, no kindness, no, I often think we need that signal like in the Hunger Games when we see each other that everybody kind of knows, I am you, that way I think more of us do that now. When we see somebody in that situation, we help out. And I think that's the best way to conquer that. You're a better woman than I. I mean, Joe and I, my husband and I have been in a store with Joe, and, people have said things. Now, Joe's, like, a big guy. He's 29. He's not cute anymore. I can't pick him up and throw him in the stroller and run. We can't. And like to your point, we wouldn't go out if it wasn't a good day. We're not stupid, So we had a woman say, you really shouldn't bring him in here. He's too big for this store, and he doesn't. So that was it. She picked the wrong day and the wrong two people. She ran out of that store so fast. And this is the city. But, and my husband with me, he has like zero tolerance. So, and he's not going to feel bad at all. She probably won't do that again.
Right. But maybe that's what they need to learn, that if you can't say something nice, don't say anything at all.
How about you, Steve?
Yeah. Look, I same thing. My son's 35. I've got a whole ton of extremely embarrassing. I used to have a plumber over my house every Friday because my son was jabbing stuff down the toilet, and they basically told me, why don't I put my son in a home? And the plumber, and that wasn't the answer I was looking for. I just fixed my toilet.
Exactly.
But and there's so many of those stories, Jackie, and I think we all have them. I have a whole bunch on the foster care side too, that have disabilities, and it's hard, but we live this. I guess it's more important that we empower and get others to understand what we go through and teach. I mean, that's enlighten them on what we live every day.
Educate and teach people. I think of all the things, I think the worst was when the Monsignor at our church asked us not to bring Joe back to church because disturbing other people. I was like, well, I don't know what the hell kind of place this is. Well, I wouldn't come
what kind
back.
of church is this? Yeah.
So
Wow.
we have since founded a special needs mass where we've got just a terrific community. And so many of us are not from that parish. We've made it our parish because we're welcomed. So, it's going to be it's going to be a battle for a long time, but we got to just keep going. That's how I feel, and we got to strengthen other parents.
There's people who are going to understand us, and there's people who aren't, right? And Steve and I were just talking about this yesterday. Not only is there judgment sometimes where people are definitely think we're not doing the right thing, but sometimes they want us to get punished. I mean, like, people will call CPS with that poor mom with the kid half naked. Somebody's like, they should call the authorities. It's cold outside and he doesn't have his clothes on, and
they think they're doing you a favor, and they call the cops, and the cops come and don't understand, and they're reaching for the taser, and you're like, "Rah, get out! We got to get away from this." So there's a whole education that needs to be done, or even if you have to, unfortunately, you wind up in the emergency room, and first, the personnel there don't really always know what the situation is when somebody's not verbal or having a behavioral moment. Yeah, it's better than it was. Let's just say. And unfortunately, there's so many of us now that the experience is greater, so the numbers are too large for them to ignore now. But yeah, we got a ways to go.
Definitely. I had a friend that lived in Arizona, and she was on the spectrum, and she was really into service dogs. And so I had never met her, but she called me on a regular basis when my court case was, in federal court. I mean, she was just so involved in it. Like she just wanted to know all the details. And I was driving home from work and my husband called and he said, "Don't turn on the radio." And I was like, "Why?" He said, Don't turn on the radio right now. I'll talk to you when you get home." And my friend in Arizona had been really depressed and upset, and she was having a meltdown of sorts. And people who loved her and cared about her called the police. And they said, "Could you please go do a welfare check?" And when they opened the door, she was holding a knife, and her service dog was protecting her, right? I mean, she was trying to hurt herself, not hurt the police. And they shot her and killed her because they said that the dog looked aggressive and that she had a weapon. They went there to check on her. Like, it still affects me. That's definitely not something that's easy to talk about in the general public because they expect our loved ones to act a certain way when authorities arrive. Like, all of a sudden, they're not going to be autistic. All of a sudden, they're going to know how to regulate their sensory system. And really, in those high-stress situations, the behaviors are really, really intense, and they're feeding off of us. We're scared. We want to protect them, or we're exhausted, whatever the case may be. And the emergency room is another area that is so hard for our families. Do you know of any things that we could advocate for in those situations besides education? I just feel like
there's a lot of work in this area. There's a mom. Her name is Kate Movius. I don't know if you've ever come across her. She's done a lot of first responder training. There are programs all over. You know, they have that silver alert. There's things happening for autism too. I think one of the things we advise our families at SNAC is if your child is prone to, have a crisis or what have you, make yourselves known to the local police department. Give them a photograph, explain to them what the situation is, give them your address, and explain to them, they can't help if they don't know. And I think the onus is on us sometimes to just kind of remove that. Go out there, the fire department, the local police department, introduce yourselves, let them know what's going on, so that can help in some ways. And advocate for more training. I mean, we didn't know either, right, until we got involved in it, and that I think is one of the ways we can help. A lot of us have done that, gone to the local precinct and made ourselves known with photographs. You got to remember to update it.
Right.
So that's been helpful. Plus, there's lots of cops and lots of docs who have kids, and they get it. So you befriend them and you ask them to help, and they do. That's grassroots stuff is the stuff that's usually the most effective.
I used to put on T-shirts on my kids. They, just had wonderful little sayings about autism, just to alert people. Because my son is very verbal. And he likes to say really unexpected things to people. Like when he ran up to the woman, we were in this beautiful nature park, and there was waterfalls, and people were wading in the water, and it was this beautiful moment where we were like, this is so nice. And he says to her, "How many babies are in your belly?" And she said, "None," which would be everybody's indication to stop the conversation or say you're sorry.
If you could read the room and you had social cues, pick up on those things.
He leaned in really close to her and said, "Are you sure?" So now we're dragging him away. Those moments were like, oh my gosh, stop talking. But those are tough. But that's like a funny one. It wasn't funny in the moment. My Apple Watch is continuously saying my heart rate's too high. Like, your heart rate is too high. And I'm like, yep, I'm out in public with my kids. No, I never quite know what's going to happen.
There's so many issues. But what I find, even at with SNAC, when I meet parents, people have been so discouraged that they don't tell us the truth. They don't tell us the kids have toileting accidents. They don't tell us there's a likelihood that the kid may aggress because they're so afraid they're going to get thrown out or not accepted or not welcomed. And we are, if I could change my tagline, I would make it, we are for the biters, not for the bitees. This is the place you don't get thrown out of. And I think just more talking about it, because we all have a tendency, even with toilet training. I mean, and I don't mean Joe's dignity and his his privacy is very important to me. I don't like to share videos of him having aggressive episodes, but I did visit CMS last year, and it was very important to do that, to let them see what that looks like, because the self-advocates, and God bless them, they are very outspoken. They go down and they fight for their rights, which is great, but what they need is not necessarily what Joe needs. And that's who they hear from, because the rest of us are just trying to keep our kids alive, can't really travel too much and advocate,
Exactly.
especially at the federal level. So it was very eye-opening to them, for me to share that this is autism. This is autism. Joe doesn't play the piano. Joe doesn't count cards. Don't think he's going to be a doctor. I love him, but he can be very aggressive. So when you tell us that we have to be in the community with other people who are typically developing at a dance class, and I show you this and I ask you how, and they realize, oh, well, I didn't realize that's what it was. So that's, again, that's upon us to make sure people see the whole spectrum and know all the things that can happen, and to be truthful about what can happen. And I was talking about toilet training, which is such a huge issue for our population. And so many of the kids wet the bed. And how many you talk about that? Nobody, right? So
Right.
occasionally I'll talk to a mom and she'll say, oh, I buy all my stuff at the bedwetting store. We have plastic sheets. We do plastic sheet. So we have to get up in the middle of the night. You could rip it down. The bed's made. I mean, these are things that people don't talk about. The feces smearing, these are things nobody wants to talk about. But once you do, you kind of feel like, hey, I'm not alone.
Right.
And
There's
she's
other
got great
people
tip for that. Yeah. Yeah. And, outside of our community, they're not always the most willing to hear this stuff, but we've got to start within our own community first to be able to talk about these things and not be ashamed and not be embarrassed. And I think that will turn the tide without, invading the kids' privacy or, destroying their dignity. There's ways to do that.
No, absolutely. Devin started helping pick out her CDPAP, her home care attendants, her caregivers. And we had people who were more mature, and then she decided she wanted people more her age. And I thought, oh, this is great. So we have 3 young women working with us between the ages of 18 and 20, and they're very eager, and some of them knew Devin from school. But the issue is Devin's embarrassed to have them support her in the bathroom, with toileting or taking a bath. So I'm like in the middle of a Zoom call or working, and I'm running downstairs to help with things that I'm like, I really wish that she was comfortable. And this is like one of those things I didn't even think about. Like, of course, it's her peer. I don't go to the bathroom in front of my friends, and I definitely don't take a shower with them. Do you know what I mean? Like, that's not a normal thing. And I don't want her to think it is.
Have to deal with. Yeah, I know. And Joe doesn't talk, so I don't even know. I try to have these conversations with him, and he's very receptive to being helped because he knows he needs it. But I don't know how to handle that. I struggle with that myself. And he has men working with him now, but I still shower him and shave him on the weekends at times, and we try to make the best of it. But certainly it's certainly an issue.
Definitely.
Certainly an issue.
Steve, puberty happens anyways. That was a topic that came up. It doesn't matter how delayed you are or what your diagnosis is, puberty happens anyways. You've had so many young people come through your home through foster care. Do you have any stories? Because I think parents really struggle with this topic too, when people... when kids are just learning to wear deodorant or taking a shower on a regular basis or dating, having a crush on someone.
Yeah, look, there's a lot of stories. There's not even an age I can attest it to. They're all 12-year-olds that do this. We've had 10-year-olds that might have gone through puberty, and we've had 20-year-olds that just going through puberty, and a lot of it's trauma-induced things that had caused delays. So it's all over the place. We've had kids that come in here that won't change their underwear. We've had kids that come in there that use that in other foster homes were using washcloths and towels to wipe themselves. And I remember another teen who was like Jackie mentioned about the feces smearing. He smeared his whole room one day. The rugs, It's why we don't have rugs in our house anymore.
Oh my goodness.
And it was all on the walls. And think about it. We had other foster kids here that were teens. I didn't want them to see that because they would have, who knows what they're going to say. They were a little higher level. I didn't want to make the situation worse as far as his self-esteem. So we shut the door and cleaned it. And it's what we do as parents. It's what we do, going through. And look, that puberty thing is so tough because these kids are inquisitive. Some of them grow up way earlier than they're supposed to, especially the boys, and some of them have been exposed from abuse on a sexual end. That causes even more issues here because we have to kind of watch that piece because these kids they're and you add the internet accessibility to it, that most of them come into our home if they have nonstop internet use, and we don't do that. But we still have to undo that, and it's hard. And when they're going through puberty, they're looking for other kids that are going through puberty. And like I said, these kids are all different. And every single kid in our house now some of them are older than other ones, and the other ones have already gone through puberty, and the older one hasn't. So it's kind of a learning curve. I look at my own son. Puberty was very at a much later age because of his autism and disabilities. It's just what we have to get through it. I'll mention that one story. You never know what these kids know, and I think I told you once, Heather, about the story. We had a kid. I think he was 12 or 13 at the time, and he was a whiz on the electronics. I mean, nonverbal, autistic, textbook. And he went to a new school, and I got a call from the teacher, and they said she says, I don't know how to tell you this, but your foster child was. We had a thing in the library, and he had got in and intercepted the security part of the internet in the library, and was actually looking at things that a kid would be going through puberty. And he was watching a video of a mom giving birth, and he was yelling out in the library, push, push, push. Well, it caused a crisis in the school because they didn't know how to handle it. He's autistic. He doesn't know what he's watching, really. He has no idea. But he was in that inquisitive puberty age. He was just going through it. And, how do you can't really, it's not like something you can go yell at him. You can't, it's not something like you can go address. Yeah. And I laughed because, they thought I was going to be mad about it and take it, that he had gotten access to something like that. It's funny now. And I didn't know, it just, Jackie, this stuff just rolls off us because we live this.
Oh, absolutely.
What are you going to do, right?
Right. But, we have a whole thing at Snack about this, like what's autism and what's just being a kid, right. And really, it's not like never the twain shall meet. At some point, I'm a big believer in behavior modification, positive reinforcement, catch the kids being good, and having a plan for these things and coming up with strategies to help them get out of those pickles. We kind of know what guys have a tendency to do and what are triggers and what are things that will, set them off on a path we don't want to be down. And I think that's something that parents need to really educate themselves about. And I am also, listen, I don't want to medicate anybody, but you can't not, when there's something that, if somebody's got an obsessive compulsive seizure disorder, you can't not medicate that. And I think there's such a fear of medication and that, he's autistic, there's nothing we can do about it. I'm like, well, no, yeah, you can.
Right.
You can't let things go unchecked and untreated and unmedicated because they're autistic. That doesn't give you a pass for certain things either. Mm-hmm. So that's a whole balancing act that I think, people have to come to terms with.
That's hard to talk about even in our own community.
Still need to parent them. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But yes, there will be things. There will be things that we need help with. And yes, there will. But to the best of our ability, we try to minimize those things.
And that's what we were talking about with my son with just like Snapchat. Like to him, you send a message and it disappears and nobody knows you sent it, even though obviously somebody could take a screenshot or they could tell the principal. And he would just forward something he saw that people responded to and have no idea
Right. The
why they
implication.
responded. He just knew
Right.
there was a reaction and he wanted to be one of the cool kids. And we would get messages. I would be at work in bright red listening to the principal tell me what he sent to somebody. And then he comes home and he didn't even know what it meant. Like he had no idea what the implication of that dirty joke was or what the meme really meant. He had no idea.
I have to tell you, I find that, the Joey is at the end of the spectrum where he's not really doing things like that, and he never really has. And many of the kids at SNAC are, on the spectrum to the point where they're not going to have the ability to do those things. And it's challenging. But the things you have to deal with when the kids are on the cusp like that, and they don't understand, and the social cues, I find that so incredibly challenging. And so many of those kids come to SNAC thinking that they want to be there with us, and then they see my son, for example, and they're like, oh, I don't want to be with him. I'm like, well, you know what? The typical kids don't want to be with you. So how are we going to level the playing field here so everybody's just kind? And we can
That's such a
teach
good
you-
point.
It's this constant game of, I don't want to be with you, you don't want to be with me, I want to go there. And parents are no better. I have to tell you. That to me is oh, that's your son? I'm like, yes. Is there
Yes, the
something you'd
biter.
like to
That's
say?
mine.
And I'm very sensitive when parents are newly diagnosed, when they have a 3-year-old. It's not that I'm ashamed of Joe, but I don't want them to, think this is going to happen to my son. He's not going to talk ever. And, we don't know that the world is different now. So we try to deliver information in pieces where it can be received and appreciated and digested before we go on too much. The intervention that's available now for newly diagnosed folks versus what we had years ago is night and day. We don't know how anything is going to turn out. And I think that all your kids that you're talking about are able to do all these really incredible things with social implications is the fact that they've had such tremendous early intervention. And I don't know why, in God's name, the state would be cutting back on that.
I know. It's a mess right now.
It's
For
cheap now,
our audience,
pay
we're in
later.
New York State, and we used to be leaders in early intervention, but the providers haven't had a rate increase in like 24 years. They were promised one. The legislature voted on it and approved it, and they still haven't gotten it. And that's
It's
just
pretty
something
much
to think about.
nationwide that the focus on early intervention is not what it was, and that it really doesn't have anything to do with partisan politics. It's just it's a mindset that I think really needs to be addressed. Parents of young kids have to really fight, and that's another thing I found. I'm doing this 30 years. We're like, militant fighting advocates all the time, and I find that there's a level of apathy a little bit. Newer folks, I don't know whether it's because there's so much more that's available and it's so complicated, and it really doesn't matter what state you're in. Pretty much everybody tells you the social service system is a maze and nobody knows really how to navigate it unless another parent really takes you by the hand. But again, nobody's coming to save you. You've got to really step up, and there's so many of us. You have to advocate, you have to get involved, and that message is something we have to send to everybody.
Right.
Jackie,
because yeah, I'm sorry. Go on, Steve.
Jackie, that early intervention, I see that a lot in foster care. The bio parents don't know what to do. They have no idea. They have issues of themselves, which cause maybe a CPS situation, and their kids are completely behind. And you would think that the goal in the foster care system would be, in the county, would be to get those kids into programs and stuff and
As soon as
supports around them
possible.
immediately. And I
Right.
do that, and I actually have been in trouble in court with the county and the provider agency for trying to get those supports around them, no matter what, because I'm going to do it no matter what, because they need it.
And that window is this.
Right.
That window, it's closing. The amount of impact in that early years is so beneficial. And some kids aren't even getting seen till they're 3. And
Right.
Exactly.
That's so ridiculous.
And
I
you know-
remember
Go ahead.
I wrote an article a long time ago about the phases of having a child with, an issue. And in the beginning, you're so quick to want to cure them. Just want this to go away. And you you run around and you find any kooky thing that anybody tells you, and you're taking out red dye number 4, and you're doing all these things, and not that they don't help, but and then the next thing you know, they're 5, and you're not really in the typical preschool, and you're trying again. You don't really have a diagnosis. You're trying like hell to get them mainstreamed, and then for those of us in my boat, it's school age, and now we have to accept that this is something. We have not mainstreamed yet. Not that we're not going to try. And then you go through that maze of these schools aren't right. There really isn't the right school. And then you learn you have to advocate for all of that. At the same time, you're starting to figure out, this is going to be around a while. I better figure out what that Medicaid thing is, because we might need that. And then that adds a whole other level of complexity. And then the next thing you know, you should be thinking about transition age, and no one's talking about it. You're 14, and and then you're 21, and you're falling off the cliff. I mean, that's how I see the whole journey, And then you're waiting to die and figuring out what the hell's going to happen when I'm dead.
Right.
You got to be better than that.
There was this mom, and it was on one of the severe autism Facebook pages, and it was an article about a parent whose child had autism, and it was a murder-suicide, but it was because she had been diagnosed with cancer, terminal cancer, and she knew that she was dying.
You're in a dark place today, Miss Heather.
Yeah, well, this just made me think, because she said, this one mom commented on it, and she said, me and my husband talk about this all the time. I hope one of us dies, then my child dies, and then the other person dies, so that when I'll be in heaven to welcome him, but he won't be alone, and this whole thing. And I just read it, and I thought, who prays that their child will die before them? But that's the situation we're in.
Who can I fight with, and what can I blow up? Because I'm not checking out. I'll tell you right now, you'll have to kill me.
There's too much to do.
I'm doing it at my own hand. I'll tell you that right now. And if I go, I'm taking a few people with me.
There's a few people that should go.
Got my eyes on a few people.
So you were recently on Good Morning America. Why don't you say a little bit about that experience? Even if it's a backstage pass, what is it like to be on Good Morning America? And what did you guys talk about?
Well, I'll tell you, we have local news here like you guys all do, and I was New Yorker of the Week a couple of times, so I've been in the press before. It's great, I love to tell the story. It opens awareness for what we're all trying to do. But Good Morning America National that's the first time I've ever did anything national. The reporter Alexis is a local journalist. She lives in the neighborhood, and her son is one of our music instructors.
Oh, so how cool.
Running a small not-for-profit like we do, on occasion, we run 7 days a week. So we run programming like classes and music and art and all kinds of things, 7 days in our 53rd Street location. We run a swim program 4 days a week. We run evening classes. So we're a busy crowd. And this young fella just started with us on weekends as a musician. He's excellent. And weekend would have it, 3 people called out. The kids never call out, but the staff does. So I said, well, I'll come in and I'll answer the phones today, just to kind of give you guys a hand so you guys can be on the floor with the kids. And I hadn't met him. I get weekly reports. I get daily reports of all the programming, so I know who everybody is. And I said, oh, you're this musician, you're great. And he had never met me in person before, so I guess I made an impact on him. And he went home and he said to his mother, you know that trailblazing women's story you do? I think I found one. So she followed up, and that's how the story came to pass. So they came in and they taped, and they asked for a parent to help, and they asked for so much stuff. You guys all know how this stuff works with TV. They always tell you that. They shoot hours of it, and it winds up being a little clip.
Yep.
But what I had asked her, and I appreciated, that they're acknowledging what I've done and what have you. I said, but the story here is these young adults with autism, with complex needs, are just totally ignored. So doing the story about me, thank you so much, but please focus on this population, this group of people in our country who've been ignored, and the can's been kicked down the road long enough. We need change. So, and she did. And I had mentioned that I had seen a piece on Colin Farrell, who also has a boy who has Angelman's, who's about to fall off the cliff at 21. I said, gee, I'd love to meet him, because, just me and he's him. He's a celebrity. If I was 20 years ago, if I had met him, the things we could have changed, you know, and I have a feeling that he's going to be really impactful on our community if we can ever get to reach him. And he thinks the same way we do. We need federal change. The waiver needs to be not a waiver for nothing, you know, all the stuff we talk about, housing, where are these guys going, just terrific. So that's what the piece ended up being. And we've gotten such a response. I'm telling you, what is it, February? That aired in January. I've met with 4 moms from different states who want to open their own thing, and you know, Zoom calls. I'm talking to the people from Autism Speaks. You know, it's gotten a lot of attention because I guess our life is pretty typical of a lot of people's, and it resonated with folks, especially that, you know, older. What are we going to do? What's going to happen? Who's going to take care of Joe? And I think that's why that piece is, we're going to get a lot of mileage out of it. And there's been some recent social media. It's still going viral. It's still happening. But I always say, and I don't mean to be ungrateful, we need to raise money too. So I wish some people would buy a bag of coffee. You know?
Right, right.
We're getting a bit of that though. We're getting a bit of that too. So it's been great. I think we've brought a lot of attention. It's also helped us in our advocacy work. Knowing that we can get press kind of makes people listen to us in a little bit of a different way.
That's definitely my slant on things. I will live out loud. Anybody puts a camera in my face, I'm happy to talk about what's going on. Yeah, because the thing is, a lot of us keep it behind a closed door, you know, and when you open that door, 2 things can happen. People could judge you. They could try to use it against you, or they could finally see what our reality is and want to help. Like, I would like to err on the side of humanity here. And, you know, you help your fellow human. So we can't expect them to help if they don't know what we're going through.
Well, you're 100% right. I mean, I'm in Manhattan, so, you know, we all live in apartments for the most part. So, you know, and our kids are tough, as you know. You know, they can do a lot of wrecking crew in your house, right? So for many of us, we usually meet at a diner or we meet somewhere else, and we finally all said, I don't really want to have anybody in my house. There's a hole in the wall. There's a, you know, bathroom with a little bit of a wreck. And, you know, so once we get those things out, and I think that's what you're trying to do here with these taboo topics, I think that will change things for folks, you know, if they will open up. Like you say, no one's going to help us if they don't know what we're going through. And if we're these silent soldiers, no one's going to help us. And we're going to drop dead if we keep trying to do this by ourselves.
That's such a good point. And I think what we can close on is a little bit about Families for Disability Rights and the Coalition for Self-Direction, because I want to make sure our audience can tune into those conversations too. If you listen to us today and you're like, ooh, they really talked about a lot of things that I feel it, like they get me. But there's a whole group of us and we meet on a regular basis. So if you want to do a little plug, I think that I know not all of our listeners are from, you know, New York, but at the same time, maybe you can give a little overview of what the mission is and what the coalition's
Sure.
you know, trying to do.
The genesis of the group was we're having some issues at the state level with some of the Medicaid waiver issues. And so a few of us met and we're trying to make a change. As we were having these conversations, we realized, you know, most of the agencies, most of the folks who work with people with disabilities, with our kids, you know, they're all meeting with legislators. They have representation. They have lobbyists. Nobody's lobbying for the kids. The unions are lobbying for themselves. Everybody's got their own self-interest. But who's really lobbying on behalf of the kids? So we thought that would maybe change the scope of our advocacy if we had a hired gunslinger with like everybody else does.
Exactly.
And so far, so good. In the next wave, we decided, you know, Families for Disability Rights is the umbrella organization. So this first initiative with trying to address the concerns we have about self-direction, a Medicaid program, a service delivery, that there's some bumps, but we think that that's the way of the future, the way to revolutionize the way services are delivered, certainly for adults as things go forward. And I think many people are of the opinion or of the assumption that, oh, well, the government takes care of those kids. They have all those buses and those programs and those things. Well, up to 21 or 22 now, you're entitled to a free and appropriate education under IDEA. But we don't have that once you're 22. Adults are not entitled to anything. It becomes an eligibility. And I think many people aren't aware of that. So that's where you talk about those waiting lists and who can get the Medicaid waiver and all those things. And people don't really realize that there's many people that don't have anything. And we think that should be a right, not an eligibility. That this is a civil rights issue of this generation, that people with disabilities should have a right to a house. They should have a right to services, to home care. They should have choice. And that's what we are going to advocate for, first in this grassroots state effort. And then our hope is to join other groups that are national, Let Together for Choice, the National Council for Severe Autism, the Autism Science Foundation, the Profound Autism. There's plenty of groups. We join together and we go to DC together. And we have new stuff, whether you like it or you don't. Maybe we got a shot. We know what the old guard did. Maybe we got a shot with the new guard of having some real change, because we haven't had any. I mean, we met with former Congressman Mark Molinaro. You know, the ADA is 30 years old. You still can't get on Amtrak with a wheelchair. You still can't get on a plane. So, like, how the hell long are we going to wait here? You know, I'm certainly not waiting 30 years. So
No.
So that's the hope. That's the hope but we needed to hire people to help us, because, we don't get any respect. Our kids don't, and neither do we as families, unless we have somebody hired going in and representing us.
Someone on the inside in a lot of ways that knows how it works. I think half of it is, I mean, Steve and I were just talking about this. He was going to go down to Albany, and he said, childcare fell through. Like you said, sometimes it's really hard for us to leave our house, and
they bank on that.
Exactly. They know we probably won't show up, right? So the thing is, for families to understand, making relationships with your local legislators or the people who are on the disability committee is entirely in your realm of possibility. That is not hard to do in the big scheme of things. But having a lobbyist, a government relations person who knows how that bill is going to be viewed, okay? Like, because we can think that's the best bill that was ever written, like the CDPAP bill. Gustavo Rivera, as a senator in New York, he came up with this plan, and I'm like, yeah, like, I am all in. And then like 50 senators co-sponsored it, and I'm like, this is going to go all the way. And then people who know what's going on said, the assembly's never going to do this. And even if they do, the governor's never going to sign it. And I felt really defeated in that moment. But you know what? You can pivot and you can turn, or you can change the way you're talking about things, because then you have the information. So it's better not to just bury your head in the sand and wait for someone to come and save you. You got to you got to do whatever you can, whatever is available to you that day. Because there are days that I've done an overnight with Devin, and then the school is calling, and there's no way I have the headspace to do it. But on the days that I do, everybody watch out, because that's, I'm going to get 300 things done, because no one is more motivated than us. We're the ones that can cause the change.
Very well said. I say all the time, I feel like I'm playing a game of beat the clock. When I can get things done and Joey's not in crisis, get out of my way.
Right.
I'm sending emails at 3 o'clock in the morning, and then there's weeks I hear because he's in crisis, and I see that with all of our group. But we understand each other, and we give each other that pass, and somebody else will step up when they can. And if we have to fade back, and that's the beauty of the group we've put together. So, and there's plenty of us. So I choose to focus on that. And you're right about the legislators. The legislators are us, we could be them. So there's no great, mystery behind the curtain there. They're people. They're people just like us. They're working for us. I hate to remind them. So it's absolutely within your purview to meet your local legislators and make sure they know about you and your family and what your needs are and all the crap you have to go through.
Absolutely. So thank you so much for coming on today. I have a feeling this won't be your last time that you come visit us. So
I hope not. I remember the day I met the two of you too. So I'm just so happy. Who would think I'm in the city, you're up there, and look at us. We're done a lot
across the state right now, right? I mean, this is the coolest thing. Friends that met because of our kids. So thank you guys Yeah, for coming here today and listening to all of these taboo topics, but also the blueprints for change, the ideas, the plans that you can put in place in your own backyard. Because if you think what we're doing in New York is cool, or what Jackie's doing in the city, or Steve in Utica, or me in Rochester, you can join us. You can reach out to us. When we put this podcast up and it's online, interact with it on the Facebook page. Tell us what you want to know next, because that's what this show is all about. We're really trying to tap into the topics that matter and that aren't always discussed in an unfiltered way, because that's the only way we get to the solutions. We have an exciting new development. We have an online merch shop. Okay, so if you are just like thinking, I really need a Finding Common Ground coffee cup or a decal for your laptop, or maybe you want the sweatshirt, I don't blame you. They're nice. We'll put a link in our podcast description. You'll also find it on our social media. There's 4 designs. My kids are really into t-shirt designs. Some of them are very different. You will not find these shirts anywhere else. I'll tell you that. These designs are definitely original. So I want you guys to take a look. Tell us what you think. And if you're wearing some of our merch, please take a picture, post it on our social media. We'll make sure that we give you a shout out. So thanks.
Jackie, thank you so much for being here today. And
My pleasure. It's a good
one
chat,
quick
guys.
thing I wanted to mention. I don't know if we're still on the air. I'm hoping we are. To donate is to help Jackie's organization that Heather and I are part of too, and that's the Center for Self-Direction. They need donations to keep this thing going. There's nothing like this, because this is to the parents. And look, Heather knows me well now. It's going to be us who makes change. It's not going to be provider agencies. It's not going to be our government. We can use all them. We can provide all those supports and get all their supports. But I firmly believe that it's going to be us as parents that revolutionize the change that we need.
And there'll be links in the description for the Coalition for
The website.
Self-Direction,
Right.
the umbrella organization snack. We'll
Right. And we
link
can
up
take
Good Morning
credit cards,
America. Yeah, you guys will find it all there.
Thanks again, guys.
Until next time, thank you.
Continue the conversation by joining our Facebook group. If you're a fan of the show, please join our supporters club. Subscribe on YouTube, rate and review on your favorite listening app, but most of all, share it with your friends. Just one more click or comment can make a huge difference and help us to continue finding common ground.